From the International Community of Christ, we're going to get a presentation on the historical cycles of the new sun. Gary Buchanan.
Well, this is going to be a pretty random discussion because I wasn't exactly sure what we were doing. And I only was notified a few days ago, and I really haven't had time to prepare very much. And then Devashish sent me an email and says, oh, well, here's my PowerPoint. And I start scrolling through this, and it's all this scientific information, and it's well organized. And I thought, well, okay, so I guess this is what we're doing. But I really haven't had time to prepare a very good PowerPoint. I'm with the International Community of Christ, also known as Christology International. We're a non-denominational religious organization. We have students studying with our school, Jamilian University, around the globe. Our biggest following outside the United States is in Canada, Japan, Australia, and Europe, Middle East, South Africa, and so forth. We are a solar school. We teach people to look at the sun and commune with the light of the sun. And this is, of course, the key to all ancient civilizations and all ancient religions. In particular, since we're talking about the winter solstice and the end of the Mayan calendar, that has a lot to do with the sun. Now, why do people think that the world is coming to an end today? Well, the one calendar stone that was found in Guatemala ended at this time. But we know that that was just one calendar of many. There are many other Mayan calendars that go on way beyond now. So what they were talking about was a great transition that was to take place around this time. Obviously, we're aligning with the center of the galaxy, to the great central sun, beyond the Pleiades. The type of sun and the type of cosmic solar radiation that we're receiving through the sun now is different than before. Yesterday afternoon, I walked outside. I take the sun all the time. I've been looking at the sun since at least 1975, every day, studying the sun, the sciences of the sun, the ancient spiritual cultures. One of our other organizations with Christology International is the Andean Explorers Foundation, founded by Jean Savoy, the explorer, who spent many years in Central America, in Guatemala and Chichen Itza and Cozumel and all the other different Mayan sites there, studying the religious teachings and history of the Maya. And then he went to Peru and began researching the Incas and the other pre-Inca culture there called the Chachapoyas. And I'm vice president of that organization, and I've been on many expeditions in Peru and in the Middle East and other countries, sailing on the Pacific and Oceania, researching things, solar cultures, ancient solar cultures. Now the Chachapoyas teachings, I should also mention the Chachapoyas people were supposedly tall, Caucasian type people with blonde hair and red hair and green eyes and blue eyes and so forth, who intermixed with the local population at some early period of time, given by most people as around 9,000 BC, long before the Maya. And of course the Chachapoyas were wiped out during the Spanish conquest, and there are very few descendants of the Chachas left. But the Chachas were a solar culture, and so that was what we've been studying. We have found tablets with inscriptions there, calendar stones, writings. We had some of the epigraphy we discovered on the stones verified by people at the Smithsonian, Brigham Young, Cyrus Gordon at Harvard, to be Proto-Sinaitic script. In other words, it was early Hebrew script, showing that at some point in time Hebrew peoples were actually in Peru, in northern Peru, working with these people. So these are the sorts of things that we study and research. Now, yesterday afternoon, I walked out to take the sun, and I looked up in the sky, and I saw the sun, and above the sun was another sun. Very clear to see. It was there all afternoon till sunset. This morning on Facebook, I found this photograph from another colleague who filmed last night's sunset. And there it is. Independent confirmation totally aside from me. This morning, I was up long before dawn and taking the morning light and meditating and communing and waiting for the sunrise. And as the sun came up, again, I saw this. And I think if you decide sometime today you might like to look up in the sky at the sun, you might see it as well. Now, this was predicted. This was a Maya prophecy. It was also an Inca prophecy. It was a Shinto prophecy, an ancient Vedic prophecy, that there would come a point in time when there would be two suns on the planet. And this is it. That's, to me, why this time is important. Not because it's the end of the Mayan calendar, or because everyone wants to hold hands and talk about love and beauty and so forth, but because we now have a genuine second sun. It's there for all to see. Now think about that. Think about that. What does that mean? What is that going to do to human consciousness? What's that going to do to evolution of the species? What's that going to do to our planet? Okay, so now I'll get into the formal chit-chat I had planned. True religion, since the beginning of time on the planet, has never been a belief system. True religion has always been civilizations that had highly educated, highly conscious, highly enlightened individuals who tried to establish that civilization. There were scientists, there were astronomers, they were artists and craftsmen, they were architects and builders and you know, very advanced people. There are civilizations that have existed on this planet that would dwarf anything we can even imagine. This is now being scientifically proven every day. Ancient civilization had cosmic and solar sciences that were part of their religious practices, responsible for all of their technologies and understanding of calendrics, the calendar, like the Maya and their Baktuns, the Sulcan 260-day cycle, the 365-year, and we'll get into a little of that. In the early 1970s, I was a school teacher in Richmond, Virginia, and on weekends I would travel down to the Association for Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach, if any of you know about that, and I worked with Edgar Casey's daughter and sons, Hugh Lynn and others, to study the readings, the psychic readings that Edgar Casey had given during his lifetime. And the big thing that Casey emphasized, and we're getting into it now, is that there would be this new age of light. And it would be a time when a new sun would appear. And it was all in harmony with the Mesoamerican calendar. It was all in harmony with the ancient Egyptian teachings. It was all in harmony with many other religious teachings, including those of the Brahmin in India and others. Casey referred to this sun by quoting the Old Testament book of Malachi. Many of you know the Old Testament book of Malachi. The last chapter of Malachi says, "For behold, the day cometh, thou shalt burn as an oven, and all the proud, yea, and all that do wickedly shall be stubble, and the day that cometh shall burn them up, saith the Lord of hosts. The Lord of hosts was an Egyptian concept, by the way, not Hebrew per se. That it shall leave them neither root nor branch. In other words, it's going to affect the species. It's going to affect the generations that come after us. It's going to affect our entire genetic structure. It's going to affect everything that's happening on the planet. But unto you that revere my name, in the Old Testament it's fear my name, but it's a mistranslation. It should be revere my name, or my word, or my presence, right? The vibration that's coming in from the source, from the God, from the one true source of all existence. The Son of Righteousness shall arise with healing in its wings. And you shall go forth and grow up as calves of the stall of the pasture, and so forth. Now, that's always been taught as something to fear. But we need not fear that concept, because everything changes, right? Everything changes, and only when we adapt can we survive as people, as families, as a species. We have to learn to adapt. We're clearly having to learn to adapt to the new climate change that's upon us. So how do we do that? Well, we teach that we need to get back in touch, just like the ancients, with the sun, because that's where it's all coming from. Okay, now let's go back a little bit in history. Our planet is 4.5 billion years old, perhaps older. Some say 4.7 billion. And man has been on the earth for millions of years. Different species of man, but man has been on the planet for millions of years. I found it ironic that we were watching the little thing there from the Aborigines in Australia. I lived and taught in Australia for a period of time and worked and studied with the Aborigines there. One of the oldest civilizations that has been found recently is in Australia, dating to at least 1 million BC. 1 million years ago, there was a great civilization in Australia. It's called the Uru, U-R-U culture, and it's been heavily explored, it's been written about, there are many scientific investigations going on. These people who were there were a solar culture, worshipped the sun, and they left stone monuments, temples, dolmen, and large amounts of epigraphy. They had writing that they left on the stones. The Uru people, this was when Australia was connected with Asia, Australasia, long before the cataclysm split those land masses apart. This solar teaching, which reached its peak about 500,000 years BC, spread to China, to Asia, to Upper Asia, whatever that was at that time, because we have no idea what the planet was really like in those days. It spread all the way to the subcontinent, India. It spread to the Caucasus Mountains. It spread to the Middle East. It spread all around the Mediterranean, across Europe, the British Isles, in that direction. In the other direction, it spread all through the Pacific, Oceania, perhaps to Lemuria, if you think there was a Lemuria, but definitely it came to the Americas, because there's a tribe at Lake Titicaca called the Uru. They are scientifically the oldest people in the Americas. They still speak a language known as Uru, and it is a solar culture. These people are the descendants of the people who built all of the monuments and cities at Lake Titicaca. And if you've seen pictures of those or studied those or been there, like some of us, that's pretty amazing that they're still here. In the westward expansion into the Caucasus Mountains, these people were the Uru, and these were the same people known as the Kuldeeps in India, or the Chaldees in the Caucasus, who around 6,000, 5,000 BC, went down and built the first cities in Mesopotamia, in Samaria. Their first city that they built was Ur, U-R, right? Their civilization was called Uruk, U-R-U-K, Uruk. And the language they spoke was this language. And this is where we find all of our roots of language. This is also where we find all of our calendar systems, our first mathematics in the West, all of our writing systems and so forth, created by these people. If you remember in the Bible, Abram and Sarai came out of Ur of the Chaldees, right? In other words, Abram and Sarah, the first Hebrew patriarch and matriarch of the whole religious system we have from the Middle East, were Chaldees. They were citizens of Ur. They knew the religion. They knew the solar teachings. And the beginning Hebrew teachings that they brought forth were these same solar teachings. So the basis of all these Western religions were originally solar teachings. Okay, so that culture north of Mesopotamia, by the way, if anyone wants to research it, was called the Ubaid, U-B-A-I-D. And pretty amazing stuff if you get into it. That's where the Scots and Irish came from. Gradually, over thousands of years, they migrated back to the British Isles, where they may have originally come from anyway, because we don't know which way they came when over hundreds of thousands of years, literally these people were migrating everywhere around the planet. But in Western China, a few years ago, they began digging up these mummies. Maybe some of you know about those. In Western China, the tall, fair, blonde, red-headed, blue-eyed, green-eyed mummies dressed in tartans, buried with bagpipes, and they're called the Urumqi, U-R-U-M-C-H-I. That's the same people, these ancient Chaldeans. Some of them splintered up, later becoming the Hurrians and the Scythians and all these different groups, the Cimmerians and so forth, that went down, became the Phoenicians, became the Cretans, became the Spartans, became this, became that, and of course that civilization that gave birth to Mesopotamia also gave birth to Egypt and all the pyramid building and that great solar religion. Okay, so in other words, this solar religion, this attention to the sun, was more than just a religion. People weren't worshiping the sun. They knew that if for 1 second that sun weren't there, there would be no life. It's a pretty simple concept. And this is something that modern man seems to have forgotten. Other ancient sites that you might be interested in, as at Lake Titicaca, there's Pumapunka, which is one of the oldest ruins there. Giant andesite blocks, which is the hardest stone there is, cut so finely that even with a modern laser beam we can't cut stones that accurately. This is dated to 9,000 to 12,000 BC. This is pretty interesting stuff. As I said, we teach that the Americas were Atlantis. There may have been an island in the Atlantic, but the basic culture that we call Atlantis was definitely in South America, no question about it. They've even found a sunken city now under Lake Titicaca, and they say that was probably the capital of Atlantis. So these teachings that have spread all over the world, especially during the Bronze Age, came from South America, and that's one of the reasons that we have spent so much time in the Indian Explorers Foundation researching these ancient cultures and trying to find out, well, what did they teach? Who are their descendants? What did they know? What were their sciences? How did they do this stuff? How did they build this stuff? What were their calendar systems, and how did they observe the cosmos? And when the land first rose following some cataclysm in South America, the land was at sea level, and it was virtually smooth and beautiful and tropical and gorgeous. and then some cataclysm happened, probably the legendary destruction of Atlantis at some point in time, and that landmass rose 2 miles into the air, which is why Lake Titicaca is still a salt lake full of oceanic animal life, because at one time it was at sea level, and now it's 2 miles above the sea. The surrounding Andes, some of them go up even more. So I think it's 23,000, 24,000 feet, some of the Andes mountains, and they're still rising. In other words, even after all this time, the terrestrial forces are still raising those mountains. So the Bolivian Altiplano was, we posit, Atlantis, and there are many, many scholars now who've written books on this. It's a pretty well accepted concept. Okay, now let's get to something else. Our genes are very much responsible for everything that we are. And all religions throughout history have taught this purity of genetic lines, right? You have to be descended from the mother to be a proper genetic Jew. You have to be descended from this person, a Brahmin if you're in the Brahmin caste, and so forth. There's always been this emphasis on racial purity, which of course has produced racism, which we all abhor, of course. I like to say, now that we have the new sun, there's not going to be any more racism, because it's no longer a matter of if your father and grandfather and so forth were taking the sun to have these genetic traits. Now it's a matter of everybody's going to get a chance. It's now open. The sun is there. It's free for anyone who wants to learn those teachings and begin to modify their consciousness, their physiology, their psychology, and there are legitimate mutations that take place in the genes among cultures that take the sun, as among the Brahmins, among the Egyptians, and so forth. Okay, but our genes are spirals, and they resonate. And all that has ever been, or ever will be, is contained, for human beings, in our genes. Okay? If we can access the information that's in our genes, then we can access a great deal of information. Our psychic fields are controlled by our morphogenetic structure. And time spirals. The planet Earth isn't just going around the sun, it's going in a spiralic motion. The sun and our whole solar system going through our galaxy is not just circling, it's going in a spiralic motion. Everything is a spiral, everything is vibrating. Maybe some of you know at Steamboat Healing Center, we do vibrational healing, and I have a new therapy called sonotherapy, where we're actually working on using sound, light, and color vibrations to help people heal themselves. And if anyone's interested in that, I'll be glad to talk to you about it later. But it works. It works. Simple sounds, colors, and lights, specifically designed to resonate with certain patterns in your muscles and organs and genes and so forth, actually do work. And of course, this is quantum science, and it's pretty well becoming understood, and will become even more understood as our species becomes more conscious during this new age. Okay, wave fronts from the sun are responsible for all life. Consciousness, being, and form. Without the sun, there would be nothing. And that sunlight is constantly bombarding our planet. There's this big field around the planet, of course, the electromagnetic field, and lots of other kinds of fields from the plasma of the sun that sustain and give us life and consciousness. And the key is, can we process that radiation? In other words, do we just ignore it, pretend it doesn't exist, put on sunscreen and hide from the sun, or do we learn to work with it and live in it, which is a much healthier way to be, if you think about it. That's the way it was meant to be. We're tropical beings. We do well with sunlight if we learn to use it properly and live with it and commune with the sun and recognize that it's there rather than hiding out. So the human feels, the morphogenetic, the etheric, the astral, the mental, the causal, the chakras, the force centers, the meridians, the Bongan ducts, all of our DNA, envelope, and fields are sustained by this solar energy. And the information we receive is processed through this entire network of everything we are. And if one follows proper techniques and teachings, as did the ancients, on how to properly process the information, we can strengthen our physical health, we can strengthen our psychological or fourth dimensional health with the chakras and the meridians and all these sorts of things. And if we go beyond that, in our religion, we teach you can develop a light body. Right? What is the light body? Well, that's the Buddha body, that's the crystal body. Or it's the Purusha in the Vedas, the golden man. It's the Ka of the Egyptians. It's the Viracocha body of the Peruvians. It's the Quetzalcoatl body of the Maya. It's this higher light body that then sustains not only the physical and psychic bodies, but the higher light being that we originally were at the beginning of time, made in the image of God. And now we've descended to this material thing. And this is the interesting message of our time. We're turning from materialism. But materialism means a lot more than just politics or money or how much we eat and these sorts of things. Materialism means we're material beings. Under the new sun, over the next, and we have cycles for this, over the next 1,000 years, given in mystical circles as the age of Chiliasm and so forth, that mankind as a species is going to evolve back to his original form. Consciousness and being, as light beings. So, yes, it is the end of the world as we know it. Thank God we're given the chance now to evolve back to what we're supposed to be. And it's not a matter of faith or belief or psychological attitude or anything like that. The sun is there. Right there. It's here. That was the promise of the Maya. That was the promise of the ancients, and it's here. And it's being seen, it's being experienced. My Facebook page today was crazy with people who were seeing this. Why? Because it's there. So, and it's not third dimensional. I'll grant you that. This is not a third dimensional sun. It's not a real physical third dimensional object. It is a fourth dimensional light projection. So if you don't see it, well, maybe your psyche hasn't yet attenuated on the right frequencies to see it, but it's there. And to me, this is the joy of the promise of the solstice and the calendar and why it's happening. It's a good thing, and we have to work with it. And the other beautiful thing is we don't have any choice. We have to work with it. Global warming is a real thing. It's going to continue to happen. The Christian mystics have taught for hundreds of years that the light of the sun is going to grow 7 times stronger. Now think about that. We're not talking about, oh, it's going to get twice as strong, then 3 times as strong, and 4. No, we're talking exponential growths. We're talking tens, hundreds, thousands. It's going to grow exponentially. Now what's going to happen? Well, as Malachi said, things are going to get pretty ashy around here. It's going to get pretty hot. Things are going to start drying up. Species are going to start dying. They already are. They already are. Why do we think we're getting all these whales on the beaches and birds falling out of the sky en masse? And all it's because of what's happening with the ethers, the sun, the light, the information factors that they're getting. That's what's causing all this, and it's not going to stop. The National Academy of Sciences just announced that they expect within the next 10 years, we're going to get such an electromagnetic blast from the sun that it can very well knock out all electricity on the planet. What happens then? What happens then? For sure, all the digital communications will be gone for a while, right? And we're so dependent upon those cell phones and those digital technologies for our banking, and the economic system, the military systems. What's going to happen if that's not there? It could be a real crisis. So what do? Well, we pray that it doesn't happen, right? But we do know that the sun is going to become more and more intense, so sooner or later it's going to happen. So we have to learn to live and communicate with the sun. It's just that simple. Now, I may not have to do it in my lifetime. I mean, I probably won't see a lot of this stuff happen. Maybe even our grandchildren won't see a lot of this stuff happen, but it's going to happen. It is happening. There's never been a period of time in world history that we have not gone through similar solar cycles, cataclysms, and upheavals. Things do not stay the same. 500 years ago, there was an inland lake here in this area, right? Went all the way up to Utah. Great Salt Lake is a remnant of that. 500 years ago, Spanish galleons were sailing into the inland sea and visiting all these places. Now we find those galleons sitting out in the desert, in the sands. Why? Because the inland sea dried up while they were there, and they couldn't get out. That's how quickly things can change with climate. We're seeing all these hurricanes and tornadoes like never before. We're seeing incredible changes in the weather. The last year in the United States was 2 degrees hotter than ever recorded before. Things are changing. The ice caps are melting. Things are changing. Now, we can view these things as scary and be afraid, or we can say, well, I think I'll tune in and find out what's happening and try to be part of this, and how do we adapt and cope with this, right? And we don't all get guns and go hide somewhere in the hills and become survivalists. We learn how to, as Lena was saying, love one another, develop a stronger heart center, develop our fields, our outreach, our psyche, our spirit. We learn to communicate with one another and grow. This is my religion. This is what we teach. Okay. Now, another event that we can talk about briefly is the Mayan calendar. Our community was established in Peru, in Yungay, in 1962. February the 2nd, 1962, this new sun began to manifest. In other words, some people in our community, dating from 1962 in Peru, have already been seeing that other sun. So we knew it was coming. It's just that everybody wasn't seeing it. That was 50 years ago. We just celebrated our 50th anniversary in our community. And we have a lot of prophecies, I should also tell you. We have a lot of books on prophecy in our community. Here's one of them that I'm holding on to today to give me a little support. Everything since 1962 has been predicted in our prophecies. We have cycles based on 3, 4, 13, the numbers of years, the Zolkin, all this stuff. One of the things in the Mayan calendar was supposedly the Venus cycle among the Maya started 3,113 BC. And so with the Mayan calendar, you have the 365-day wheel, and you have the 260-day wheel. And they interlock, and over a period of time, they predict cycles, particularly the Venus cycles. So this past June the 6th, we all observed the Venus transit, right? Anybody see the Venus transit? It happens every 243 years. In other words, it's the only time in our lifetimes that we'll ever see it. That cycle was known to the Maya. It happens twice. When it happens twice. One time, then a couple months later somewhere else. This year it transited over Reno on Tuesday evening. On Wednesday morning it was over Israel, which I found a little symbolic, emphasizing over the west we got the Venus transit. That occultation followed upon a full moon, if you remember, super full moon on May the 5th. These are Mayan cycles. We observe these in our community. And then there was a major eclipse on May the 20th. Maybe some of you saw that. Those are all dates in the Maya calendar. They're all dates in our calendar. In our community, we do have a calendar. If I can get to it. There it is. You can see that our calendar is based on actual dates that we've experienced things. And you can see that it's quite similar to the Mesoamerican calendar that shows you the equinoxes and the solstices. Equinoxes. And today, solstice. And then we say the new sun began manifesting on February the 2nd, 1962. And the cross day from annually, it's a fixed calendar, it happens every year just like this. Across from that we have August 3rd and 4th midnight. Splits the year exactly in half. Now these are approximate time periods because it's a 365.4 day or year. So we have to say, well, maybe it's earlier than that, a little later than that, but it's always around that time each year. Groundhog Day is February the 2nd, by the way. That's also a sacred day in the Christian church, and in China it's often the New Year's Day, so it's an ancient date aligned with the sun. And then we have other days where things happen, and we can break each of these periods up into days 3, 4, 13, following the Mayan cycles, and we can project ahead and predict what's going to happen, because one point we need to understand, there's nothing new under the sun on the planet. Everything keeps happening over and over and over again. Things repeat themselves. I just recently had a genealogical chart of my family made. I've been getting stuff for 20, 30 years from family members and associates sending and say, oh, well, here's your family line, and so forth. And these geneticists have now tracked my family line back literally to the Caucasus. In other words, I can go through Scotland, Ireland, Spain, Carthage, the Middle East, the Black Sea, probably northern India at some point in time to Vashish. And you realize, and all of these people who were my ancestors going back 7,000 years were all members of solar cultures. In Ireland, they were building solar temples. In Scotland, they were building their hinges. In Carthage, they were building them. In Spain, they were building them. In the Middle East, they were building them. And there's a new city they just found in Turkey called Göbekli Tepe, which dates to 12,000 BC. And they say it's probably the most sophisticated religious solar temple they have found anywhere. And it goes back to 12,000 BC, showing that those people were even there at that time. So people say, well, why is it you're in religion? And why is it you're looking at the sun? And I'm saying, genetically, did I have a choice? As you get older, young people, you begin to realize there's no such thing as free will. There's no such thing as free will. Now, we like to think we have free will, but in my book, I've never taken a step in my life that wasn't already marked out for me. And I think a lot of people, if they begin to analyze their lives begin to see that. You were made to do this, you were made to do that. There was always that angel on your shoulder who told you what to do, even though you wanted to do something else. I wanted to be a composer and conductor, and I wanted to make recordings, and I wanted to do that sort of thing. Well, that's very nice, Gary, but here's what you're really going to have to do, you know? And no matter what I've done, with the healing center now, I never wanted to get into healing. I mean, who wants to be a doctor? Who wants to play that game, you know, and have to deal with people, sick people and their problems all the time, and meet total strangers and see if you can fix their gout or their bad back or this or that. I never wanted to do that. Too bad, Gary. You have this knowledge, you've been exposed to this research and so forth. No, you have to do this. You see? So that, to me, that's the crux of the matter for the New Age. If we learn to live with our environment, the natural environment, and the sun, and the cosmos, and trust in God to send us the proper information and work with us and learn to deal with this adaptation to the new conditions that we are going to be experiencing, and pass that information on to our families and friends, then we will be guided to do that. If we fight it, we're just going to have problems. Just going to have problems. I can tell you, sometimes I've been put in situations, dragged, kicking, and screaming, you know. I don't want to do that. Well, you have to do that. I have a funny story about that. When I first came to Reno in 1979, the bishop of our church at that time, Gene Savoy Sr., said, well, what do you want to do? I said, well, the last thing I want to do anymore is music. Because, you know, now that I've been getting into the sun and experiencing these higher levels of consciousness, all I want to do is wear a robe, be a monk, and plant grass, or help build this, or take care of that, clean this up, whatever. Oh, no, no, no. You've been prepared to be a musician. So in the church, we need a bell choir. But I don't like bells, so that's too bad. We got to have a bell choir. And we need somebody to play the organ. I hate the organ. Well, that's too bad. You're going to have to play the organ. Because we have to have an organist, right? We got to have a choir. We got to have an organ. We got to have the bells. But this doesn't mean anything to God. That's beside the point. That's beside the point. The point is you have to get organized. You have to find like-minded, like-spirited brothers and sisters you can work with and build something that's bigger than you. Give yourself to a cause that's greater than yourself, a divine plan. Give into it, and you will be guided, and you too could end up perhaps being a Gandhi or something, you know? And by the way, Gandhi made a lot of mistakes too, didn't he? I read one time he wrote a letter to Hitler thanking him for bringing back the Aryan teachings or something. Mahatma, you got it wrong there. That kind of stuff. So, in other words, no matter how holy a person is, including Jesus probably, we make a few mistakes now and then. Okay, so we talked about the Venus cycle, and the end of the Venus cycle of the Maya, 3113, just ended. This last transit of Venus is the last one we'll see in our lifetimes, and it's the last one that was even needed to calculate the Mayan calendar. And here's a good reason why. In Kabbalah, in mystical Judaism, Venus is called the Shekinah light, the Shekinah. Do you know that term? The feminine light of Venus, the morning star. Isis is Venus. Asherah was Venus. All these gods were Venus, including Venus in Rome, Greece. Anyway, so the Venus light was the feminine light. And with these crossings of Venus, you get this feminine, holy presence, golden cloud presence. In the Old Testament, when Moses and the children of Israel there was a tent full of the Shekinah cloud, vapors, the holy presence of the Lord, whatever Lord that was. Some one in the hierarchy down from the source. But they taught that the Venus light was this holy light that people should be looking for. So they built all these temples and orientations to be able to observe these Venus cycles, right? So they would know when to catch the Venus light. Have any of you ever been to Roslin Chapel in Scotland? At the back of Roslin Chapel, which is built, by the way, on the same dimensions and architecture of Solomon's temple in Israel, right? In the back of the chapel, in the wall, there's a cylinder. It's a 5-sided cylinder because the orbit of Venus observed from outside the planet makes a pentagon in the sky. It's called the Venus cylinder. It's a solid gold cylinder, and inside there's a little ruby gemstone. And when Venus is the morning star on the horizon in the east, before the sun comes up, a light beam comes from Venus through that box into the chapel and floods the entire chapel with this Venus light. Isn't that amazing? And of course, Venus was linked with Mary Magdalene and all of that tradition that's so popular in the Da Vinci Code and all this kind of stuff. But in other words, the people who built Roslin Chapel in Scotland in the, what was it, 14th century, 15th century, knew these things. Where did they get all that information? Well, from their ancestors, right? So they knew these things. So since the beginning of time and many civilizations, Venus has been called the morning star or the harbinger of the dawn. Shekinah in the Hebrew teachings, but also important to the Maya, right? The Maya obviously considered Venus very important, and the Aztecs as well, and the Inca. And so in Mexico City, you've got your Pyramid of the Sun, you've got your Pyramid of the Moon, and you've got your Pyramid of Venus, right? All oriented to capture those. Also, I don't know if you know this, but the 3 pyramids in Mexico City are lined up exactly in the same orientation as the 3 pyramids on the Giza Plateau. And they're supposed to be the 3 stars in Orion's belt. Or Osiris in Egypt was Orion, right? Maybe it was Quetzalcoatl in South America, I'm not sure. But the point is, these priesthoods, these civilizations were in contact with one another by sea. People were sailing all over the place in ancient times. This idea that somehow people accidentally floated in a canoe from Europe to the Americas is nonsense. So is the idea that Columbus didn't know America was there. Of course he knew America was there. His cousin was Prince Henry of Portugal, who had already sailed to South America several times. The Sinclairs from Scotland were sailing over here all the time. So people knew the Americas were here. It was no big secret. So if they could do it during that period of historical time, they could have certainly been doing it for thousands of years beforehand. And that's one of the things that we talk about in our research. Okay, so now during this new time, over the last 50 years with our community, people have been experiencing the effects of all this new energy that's coming in. It's primarily solar energy, but don't forget that solar energy also carries cosmic rays and vibrations from, once again, the great central sun coming through the galaxy to us, through our sun. So we're picking up lots and lots of information, which is very disorienting. And we have to learn to deal with that disorientation. It has a huge effect on people's psyche, particularly if people have mental, emotional problems. So we're likely to see a lot more mental and emotional problems with people who aren't able to handle these energies. And so I like this idea right now, after the terrible thing that just happened in Connecticut, that they're saying, well, maybe we ought to spend a little more time working on mental health. I go, you reckon? You know, it's like, well, of course we should. So, basically what I'm saying is it's a good time. The sun is good, and we need to learn to work with it. We also teach that the most powerful force among people, as Lena said, is love. From the heart center, we would say higher heart, the heart of Jesus, the heart of Buddha, Well, I've got some nice pictures of that, actually. I should show you that. That's our sanctuary at Red Rock, where we have sunrise services every Sunday morning since 1980. Heraclitus of Ephesus was a solar adept who taught this principle of the solar logos. Kobo Daishi in Japan, founder of Shingon Buddhism, taught these same solar teachings. And our Japanese school in Japan teaches Kobo Daishi's teachings as good Christians. Our bishop there he tells people, says, return to your original religion. Shinto, the way of the sun. Shintao, Tao, way, Shin, sun. Return to your original religion, which was the original Christian religion that Jesus and everybody else was practicing. Okay, there's the golden Purusha from the Vedas. There's Buddha meditating from his light heart center with the true love of heaven, and not just emotional love from human psyche. We have to develop that higher love, that totally unconditional, uncontrollable, real love from the heart, instead of this, well, I'm a good person, I think I will love you. It's stupid. Of course we love each other. We have to love each other. Otherwise we will not survive. You cannot walk in the rays of the sun with an impure heart. It will kill you. That's one of the surest ways to extinction. There's Yeshua, the Carmelite Essene, sitting on a hilltop watching the sun. Here's your brain on sun. There's the sun, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so those are some of my pictures. How much time have I got? I got 5 minutes. So I'll...
Questions?
Yes, questions.
Now I'll switch over to turn the light on.
Sure.
I'm here in the dark for a long time. I have questions. How does, if I understand the importance of our sun, how does it relate to all the other suns? Is there an infinite amount of suns? And this looks a lot like what goes on out at Steamboat Hot Springs.
Mm-hmm.
I recognize the logo, and I know they do color and
Yeah, that's
vibrational
what
heating there.
I treat people.
Yeah, so we'll throw in a pitch for that too after you tell us what's up with the suns.
Well, yeah, we teach that as all the ancients have taught, all the sun systems in the universe are connected. In other words, the closest sun, I believe, to our sun is Sirius, perhaps. So we're receiving a great deal of information from Sirius through our sun. And Sirius then in turn is connected to other sun systems. And it's also what we call a synergetic connection. In other words, if you know what a geodesic dome looks like, well, it's this line from this sun to that sun, from that sun to this sun, back to that sun, and building a geometry throughout the entire universe. So all of these pathways of light are connected. And that's why I would say if I'm having a spiritual meditation or something and I'm with another individual who's experiencing the same state of consciousness, we're linked. But in the linkage, we're more powerful than each of us individually joined. There's a third synergetic power. Most great religious leaders have always had 12 disciples, no matter who they were, Buddha, Jesus, others. Why? Because 12 is a great number if you want to do synergetics and build up those energies, because you got 12 people all working together. You got a heck of a synergetic power going on there.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Working with the sun, you mentioned a couple times. In that process of working with the sun, would you have an influence on the Earth's environment?
Yes. Our job as ministers in our community, with our regular solar gazing and inflections, is to try to temper, ameliorate things that are happening. I would say, give us another day, give us another week, give us another year. Don't hit people so hard. Please, let's don't have any more tsunamis this week, because all this is controlled by the sun. Everything on this planet is controlled by the sun. We're kidding ourselves if we think we're above, beyond that somehow. No, I've got free will. I'm a really well-educated person. I know what I'm doing. The heck with the sun. What can I say?
Sun wins. Well, we have just a couple of minutes if you guys want to take a quick break and then be back here at 2 o'clock sharp, and we'll go back to the international sync. And will you stick around and you can meet some people in the back office?
Sure.
It's private back there. There's also a visual of the sync, because I know there was probably some follow-up. Good job, huh? Yeah. That's a lot of new information there. So 2-minute break, literally 2 minutes, 4-minute break, 3-minute break.